Hi guys, I just finished playing my first round game at the European Club Cup here in Serbia, and I played against an absolute superstar, Dmitry Andreikin, former Russian champion, rated 27-29 in the top 30 in the world. It's probably one of the strongest players I've ever played. I've played a few other 2700 plus players, but this was a very special game and a big honor to play against such a superstar. In this video, I'm going to review this game and give you all the ins and outs and a lot of lessons to be learned. So let's dive straight into the action. Andreikin playing with the white pieces. He opened here the game with the move 1c4. And honestly, I've seen this opening before, 1c4, the English opening. But I didn't really expect it for today. There are so many different lines I had to prepare against such a strong player, so I didn't pay too much attention to it. So here we go, e5, knight c3, knight f6, knight f3, knight c6. It's the 4 knights variation, and now once again there are so many possibilities, and he really surprised me here with the move a3, which is kind of a modern way of playing the English. It's not really an attempt to prove an opening advantage, but that's what they usually do at the very top, just to get a playable position as white. And well, surprising your opponent is really worth something. I decided to play here the move g6, and after g3, bishop g7, bishop g2, castling kingside by both sides. Okay, so far pretty normal, pretty standard. d6, d3, and now, okay, logically I would develop my bishop somehow and try to connect my rooks. There are a lot of possibilities here. I can make pawn moves like a5 and h6. It's all pretty good and playable for black. I played here the move bishop f5, which is some sort of provocation. I will explain that as well. My idea is to go queen d7 and maybe to go bishop h3 later. And if I can exchange that bishop, it's an important defender of the white king and usually becoming a pretty good piece. But my opponent played here the move e4, and that's actually what I wanted to see to force him to block the center. Now I have to move my bishop again, but after h3 I'm trading off my bishop for the knight, and we do get this imbalance in structure. My opponent has the bishop pair, but I do have a beautiful square on d4, which cannot be covered by a white pawn any longer. So I played here knight d7, and I think that is also quite a thematical maneuver. I'm reinforcing control over the d4 square, opening up the diagonal for the bishop. So together with the pawn and knight on c6, I do have nice control on that square. On the other hand, my opponent will have ideas to try to open up the position later on, so that his two bishops, they will become pretty good later on. Now he played very interesting move as he went for the move h4, and we will see later what that idea is. But obviously at some point white is really thinking about trying to play the move h5 and put black under pressure on that king side. Now I played knight d4, and he doesn't want me to take the bishop, so he drops back with the bishop to g2, and I play c6. So I think it's a good move, gaining control over the d5 square so the knight can never go there. My opponent played b4, grabbing space on the queen side, and here, interesting moment. I'm not sure what I should do, but I think the move I played, a5, is quite interesting, as I'm trying to put his pawn on b4 under pressure. I'm threatening to take, and then the rook on a1 is unprotected. So he played here the move b5, and I was, frankly speaking, I was struggling a bit here, trying to find out what the best move is in the position. And I don't really want to touch my c pawn. If I do that, then the d5 square becomes really weak. I played here the move knight c5, which in my opinion is a very human, natural continuation. However, as I checked later with the engine, the move a4 is really interesting, and there are ideas here for black to set up a bind on the queen side. It's also an idea my opponent mentioned afterwards, as I can go here for the move queen a5 and then knight c5. I have the b3 square, which I can use with one of my knights. There's definitely some play on this side of the board, and well, one of the key points is that if you do take with a knight on a4, well, then queen a5 comes in with tempo, hitting the knight, and well, I think white has to move the knight to a pretty bad square, and also the pawn on b5 can be hanging later. So things are looking quite good here for black. So the pawn should not be taken. A thematical plan here could be to go rook b1 with the idea to go rook b4. But here, I'm in time to go queen a5 to attack his knight. And here, the move rook b4 is just not good, as it can be met by c5. The rook is in trouble. If it goes away, then the knight on c3 can be taken. I think this is the way I should have played, but I went here for the move knight c5. And now my opponent played here this move rook b1, which is a good move, putting more pressure on the b file. And yeah, I think it's a bit annoying for me how to deal with that pressure, because he is the one going to decide whether to open up that file or not, and probably he's going to open it up. But I have to place my pieces in such a way that they cannot be as active as possible. I played here the move queen c7, which is probably a playable move, but it's a bit too slow. It's a bit indecisive. There's no clear plan behind this move. Once again, a4 is the move my opponent recommended afterwards. Queen c7 is what I played. Bishop e3 is a good move. I decided to go back with my knight to e6. And as you can see, I'm having quite nice control over the d4 square. But what's worth it? That knight cannot really go anywhere. And the knight on e6 also cannot really move anywhere. And I was aware of that, of course. But I felt I could develop some play. So my opponent played here h5. I think excellent move. As of course, I'm not going to touch my g-pawn as the queen can come in. Maybe still a move like a4, but it feels pretty inconsistent with what I've been doing earlier. And my plan now was to strike here with a move f5. But I think this is a very double-edged move, and perhaps even a serious mistake. What I was hoping on here is that my opponent would take on g6 and open up the king side. So then my king will become eventually more vulnerable. But in that case, my plan had been to sacrifice a pawn with a move f4, hitting the bishop. And I don't mind he is going to take on h7 in that case. There's king h8, and with this pawn on f4, half open f-file. Maybe I can double rooks. Maybe I can get the queen in at some point. Black has tremendous attacking prospects. But instead, pity for me, but my opponent played a much better move. He took on f5, which is something I had seen, but I felt, okay, I can take with a pawn, and, well, my pawn structure does look nice, but look at this. He took on c6. Now, he's opening up the position, both for the rook on b1, as well as for the bishop on c6, on g2, which is targeting the pawn on c6, pardon me. Now, another key move, as thanks to the presence of that pawn on h5, the pawn goes to h6 to hit the bishop, and still I felt everything is sort of under control. My pieces are controlling the d4 square. Maybe I can go f4 at some point, and my intention had been to meet queen h5 with something like queen f7, and in that case I think everything is under control. I can swap queens, and my knights are looking great. However, and that's something which happened not to me many times, but I think to many other players, just before my opponent played his next move, I realized he has actually a very, very good move here, and that is the move knight e2. And I had seen this move on various occasions earlier in the game, but I kind of underestimated its strength at this point, because his plan is now just to get rid of basically my strongest piece. That knight on d4 is holding the position together, and it's not only looking for active opportunities, but it also defends the pawn on c6. And now I do get some problems with my pawn. Let me show you one line, which is not what I did in the game. I could have taken on e2, but after queen takes e2, well, I think my opponent's position is looking very nice. He has ideas here to go with the bishop to b6, and also to bring the queen to f3, to hit both the pawn on f5 and the pawn on c6. One fascinating line is the following one. In case of f4, there is queen g4 check with a double attack. If I go king f7, he puts the bishop on b6. Now the queen is in trouble. I could move the queen to c8, but then look at this maneuver. I'm not sure my opponent had seen it, but definitely if he would have got to this position, I'm pretty sure he would spotted this beautiful maneuver. Queen h5 check, and if I go back with the king, which is the most obvious move, then this idea with queen h1 is fantastic. Now the queen and bishop on this diagonal. Working together, the pawn on c6 is gonna fall. When that pawn on c6 is gonna fall, my entire position is gonna collapse as white is taking over control on the light squares and all my pieces are looking awful. Now, I didn't see this entire variation, but I understood that if I take on e2, the queen is coming into f3. Therefore, after knight e2, I decided here to go for the move king h8. But he's going to take on d4, and I have a difficult decision to make here, whether to take with a knight or with a pawn. If I take with a pawn, which gains the tempo hitting the bishop goes back to d2, and anyway, queen f3 will follow very soon. And I have these weak pawns on c6 and f5. He has the bishop pair, he has the b file, and I don't have anything in return for it. So feels like during the game I felt like I had to take with a knight. And now, fantastic idea and not too difficult for such a superstar. He gives up his pair of bishops by trading off the bishop for the knight on d4. I take back with a pawn and he comes in with the queen to f3, hitting both these pawns. Now I thought that with the move bishop g5 I can trade off the pawn on c6 for the pawn on h6 probably, but he has estimated very well here that after queen takes pawn, queens are coming off the board, and that pawn on h6 is it's not too important. I played here rook a b8, also other moves that are not looking too great. And now he played another absolute key move with rook to b5. And this is absolute killer move. I cannot really take on b5 because he does get a protect a passed pawn, which can count on the support of the bishop. The rook can come in. This looks just awful. And to be honest, I have to confess that during the game, I consciously played rook b8 and I saw rook b5, but I really thought that I can now try to generate some counterplay with the move f4, looking for ideas to open up the f-file for the rook and then get the bishop in, but I forgot that the bishop on g5 is hanging. So I had to change my plans here, and after rook b5, I decided to take the pawn on h6. And okay, material's even, but look at all my pawns. Probably this is one of the worst pawn structures I've ever had. 5 isolated pawns, and well, he is super active, and he can take the pawn on a5. But after taking on a5, my position is bad, but I will try to get counterplay with the move f4. And really, I think the move I really enjoyed most in the game by my opponent is this move f4. It's a beautiful idea. It's fixing that pawn on f5 first of all, but also it makes it harder for my bishop to get back into the game at some point, perhaps to d8 to defend the pawn on a5. He's not interested in winning that pawn on a5. After rook c8, bishop d7 is played, and well, he is attacking my pawn on f5. And anyway, now you're thinking, why did I play rook b8 and then rook c8? Well, anyway, he's going to play rook fb1 and force me to give up that open file, as I never want to take on b5, as it gives him a passed pawn. So therefore, rook c8, bishop d7. My position is just really, really awful. Rook c7 here, and well, he can take on f5. So now he is actually a pawn up. I played here rook c5, and okay, my position is bad, but in bad positions you make more mistakes. I was hoping, of course, that he's gonna take, and then the bishop is hanging, and maybe I can get some counterplay. Probably it's not going to be enough anyway. But he played another classy move, bishop e4. The bishop is back. He has collected the pawn, and still I cannot take the rook on b5. I played rook c8, trying to consolidate the position there, holding the c5 square, but rook fb1. He is going to infiltrate with one rook on the 7th. Maybe a second rook is coming as well, and then he can create a mating attack against my king. I played bishop f8, but now another excellent move. Rook takes c5. And here again, either capture doesn't work. If I take with the pawn, it does improve my structure, but he's going to play rook b5, and the pawn on a5 cannot be defended. The bishop is controlling the a8 square. Rook is not able to go there. If you go a4, you play rook a5, you pick up the pawn, and it's a very important pawn because you can easily push that pawn to a7 eventually, and the bishop is controlling the queening square. That's absolutely game over. Therefore, I decided to take with the rook on c5, but he played here rook to b8, pinning my bishop on f8. And well, if I go king g7 to get out of the pin, he goes rook b7 check, and then the pawn on h7 is going to drop as well. I played king g8, but then anyway, there is bishop takes h7 with check, deflection motive. I decided to resign here. Now he's 2 pawns up. After king takes h7, rook takes f8. This rook endgame is completely hopeless. It's 2 pawns down, and the other pawns are going to fall very soon as well. So yeah, that was a very painful start. Of course, it can happen that you lose to such a strong player, but I'm actually quite happy with the way I fought in this game. Well, in the middle game, I chose the wrong plan. I made some wrong assessments. Well, this can happen. Hopefully, in the coming days, I'll be able to get some better results, obviously. But for now, it was a nice experience to play such a strong player. Congratulations to Dmitry Andreikin. Once again, thanks for sharing with me some of your thoughts afterwards. That's really appreciated. And I hope you guys also enjoyed watching this video. Well, if you do like this video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. I will cover many more exciting games I'm going to play in this event. So make sure to come back to the channel. Thank you. Bye-bye.